I just wanted to share a few of the astrological correlations that I've recognized that hopefully will provide a little context for what's happening in Ukraine with Russia and Vladimir Putin. This is Vladimir Putin's natal chart. We don't know the time. It's October 7th, 1952, Leningrad, and using a 12 p.m. chart and a zero Aries house cusp. In his natal chart, I am struck by several things. His Sun, Saturn, Neptune, really Mercury quadruple conjunction. It's all square to Uranus. And this Pluto square Jupiter alignment he has in his natal chart. There's many more things we could unpack, but just to touch on a couple of things. You often see Sun-Saturn alignments with people who maybe desire control or need control or like to have a lot of authority over oneself or one's own life, and then potentially that can extend outwardly onto others. It's interesting at this Saturn square Uranus, you see where one's sense of freedom, Uranus, has to conform to authoritarian structures or whatever the situation of limitations are imposed by the authoritarian situation. One way I see this Sun, Saturn, Neptune, Mercury triple conjunction coming through is in Putin's tendency to have a deceptive kind of image campaigns. You see this with Saturn, deceptive image, Neptune, and the way he's trying to portray himself through the media or whatnot, through information exchange, Mercury. He often puts himself in photo ops. Like the most extravagant one I've heard of is where he was the diver who supposedly had found these ruins when they had obviously been found by some archaeologist, and he took pictures of himself actually in underwater diving as supposedly he had found these ancient ruins himself. So it's obviously a deceptive image campaign that he's putting on for the Russian people. So I found that fascinating. You also see this Pluto square Jupiter alignment often with people who have a tendency towards ambition, whether it's actual global power, Pluto, global Jupiter, or whether it's worldly kind of breadth of knowledge. That often you can see it come in a lot of philosophical inquiries, or people who have a deep sense of interest in how the world works, or world history or deep history. So it can come through in a lot of different ways, but it also comes through in a lot of people who have lots of wealth. Jupiter is excess and abundance, and Pluto is power, and it often can come through in monetary sort of sources of wealth and power. And I've actually heard a rumor that Vladimir Putin might be the richest person on the planet, but it's all conspiracy hearsay. Let's take a look at Putin's transits for the spring and summer of this year. So I'm going to start here at February 27th. This is the day that Crimea was annexed by, or at least invaded, I guess, maybe not the annexation, but the invasion took place by Russian forces under, in secret uniform, invading Crimea, which is a peninsula of Ukraine. And what's interesting about this to me, several things. First, the Pluto opposite Jupiter and Pluto square Uranus in the sky, the two furthest outer planets and the longest running aspect. And it's been an aspect since roughly 2008, and will continue to be an aspect through the end of the decade, through 2020. So in the last square between Uranus and Pluto, we saw the ascension of Hitler, Mussolini, Mao, and Stalin, that Richard Tarnas points out in Cosmos and Psyche. And it's interesting that in our current Uranus square Pluto period, it happens to be in direct alignment with Vladimir Putin's sun. So this is where the sun was when Vladimir Putin was born, and this is where Uranus and Pluto are in the sky. So you see Uranus is making an opposition with the sun, and Pluto is squaring the sun really tightly right now. And another thing that's happening is just for the last year, Jupiter has been in opposition with Pluto and square to Uranus in the sky, and making a T-square, making a grand cross really with Vladimir Putin's Sun-Saturn alignment. So a couple other things that we should take into account here is that not only is it Pluto square Vladimir Putin's Sun, but it's also the beginning of his Pluto square Saturn period, which is going to be like a 3-year transit that he'll be having for quite a while. And then a more speedier transit is Saturn is square to his natal Pluto. So this is more like a 1.5 year long transit, and will last for another 9 months or so. So let's see. This is the day roughly that the invasion of Crimea took place, and it happens that Mars was beginning its real, famous kind of grand cross with the Uranus, Pluto, Jupiter T-square, and it was stationing here at 27 Libra, just off of Vladimir Putin's Mercury. And over the next several months, you'll see Mars moves backwards in the sky, moving by weeks. This is now May 1st. This is today, or roughly a couple days ago. You can see that Mars is moving closer and closer, or had been moving closer and closer to Vladimir Putin's Sun, just crossed over it, and then will station at 9 in latter part of May, then start to move backwards across his Sun. This is June of 2014, where it'll be exactly conjoining his Sun and then his Saturn. And what's interesting about this is the fact that this Uranus-Pluto obviously can correlate to kind of an unleashing or an awakening of the ambition or the unconscious parts of one's psyche or the collective, and the fact that it's tightly aspecting his Sun at the same time that Mars, the traditional god of war, but also just relates to an ability to be active and courageous and to take action. So it doesn't have to be warlike, but it can just be the desire to take advantage of whatever energy one has to, in this situation, to awaken oneself or to awaken the power, to take power, to accomplish more. So it seems as though a lot of this natal kind of Jupiter-Pluto ambition that he has is potentially being activated by the Jupiter-Pluto opposition in the sky that we have right now, and the T-square grand cross with Mars and Uranus right on his Sun. Another aspect I'd like to point out is that he's also going to be having a Uranus opposite Saturn period. And the fact that he's born with Uranus square Saturn, it's really a Uranus square Uranus period and a Uranus opposite Saturn at the same time. So this potentially could, in the shadow form, it could indicate more of a fragile kind of sense of stability. The fragility comes from Uranus, and one's sense of stableness or security comes from Saturn. So potentially his sense of stability or control could be disrupted with Uranus, and with his natal Saturn-Uranus, that tendency to want to maybe control the unpredictable, the sudden, the change, the novel, the progressive in Uranus. You could see that also coming through. So this is a very, very fascinating time period for Vladimir Putin, as far as both the double Pluto, Saturn, and Saturn square Pluto, which could correlate to a sense of restriction and a sense of one's boundaries kind of closing in on one. This relates to the Groffian, Stan Groff's perinatal matrix number 2, which is kind of the no exit sense or feeling, where one feels as though one is trapped in a kind of an unworkable situation. This could maybe be correlative to or be enhanced, or that sense of feeling that way might be enhanced by the sanctions, the economic sanctions that the West is trying to impose on Putin and his friends, and potentially the Russian people as well. So it's a very fascinating situation where if he, I guess, maybe feels more and more of that sense of restriction, and from what I understand, this crisis kind of began, not just from the Ukrainian Revolution, but that revolution in some levels was instigated by a desire by at least the western half of Ukraine, it seems, to join NATO. And NATO has never been as close to the Russian border, obviously, as it would be if Ukraine would become a part of NATO. And then I guess we'll end here with this is a map of Ukraine here. This is the border of Ukraine, and this is Crimea, which Russia has basically already taken. And this is Russia, and these are Russian bases, or not bases, they're where satellites have recognized Russian troops. So the Russian troops are kind of getting together in these places. This is mostly Russian speaking Ukraine, the darker the blue. And then these are places where pro-Russian separatists at least have taken over buildings within cities and trying to take over the government facilities, it seems. So it seems maybe they're going to try, like, maybe if Russia were to invade and want to take over part, it seems like maybe this would be the part that they were looking to take because of the majority of Russian-speaking population. It's almost, I mean, you can see the border potentially of Russia just being cut off here. I mean, obviously it used to be all Russia. So it's a fascinating situation. I don't have any insights into the future or anything like that, and don't think astrology should be used that way, really. But I feel like this is definitely some contextual information that can help us understand potentially what's happening even within Vladimir Putin's psyche. So I hope this potentially was helpful, and we'll talk again soon. Take care.